My parents destroyed my savings to fund my brother's dream wedding. They regretted it at the reception. The day I discovered my art school dreams had been liquidated, the sun was shining. Birds chirped outside my window as if nothing had changed. My phone screen glowed with the banking app's cruel verdict: $0 available balance. Just yesterday, there had been $23,467, 3 years of double shifts at the diner and nights designing logos for local businesses. 3 years of saying no to movies, vacations, new clothes. 3 years of being the responsible one. And now, nothing. My stomach twisted as I dialed my mother. She answered on the third ring, the clatter of dishes in the background. "Mom, I need to talk to you about my savings account." A pause. The water shut off. "Oh, honey, I was going to mention that. Your father and I had to make some adjustments for Tyler's wedding. You know how important this is. The Kaplans are practically royalty in this town." My hand tightened around the phone. "You took my money without asking me?" Took is such an ugly word, Eliza. We're family. What's yours is ours. Her voice softened to that silky tone she used when selling overpriced houses to unsuspecting clients. "Besides, you weren't really doing anything important with it, right? Just those art classes. This is real life." The conversation ended there, not because I'd hung up, but because I'd gone silent, my lifelong response to the Alexander family dynamic. Why argue when no one was listening? I'd perfected invisibility long before my money vanished. It started when I was 7, and Tyler was 9. He'd scored the winning goal at a soccer game, and my parents threw him a surprise party. That same day, my painting had won first place in the school art fair. I'd waited until dessert to mention it, holding up the blue ribbon with trembling hands. "That's nice, sweetie," my father had said, barely glancing up from the cake he was cutting. "But let's focus on your brother's big moment." That night, I tucked the ribbon into a box under my bed, the first item in what would become my collection of unacknowledged achievements. Now at 24, that box had grown, but nothing had changed. Tyler still commanded the spotlight, while I was the stagehand, expected to ensure everything ran smoothly without seeking recognition. After the call with my mother, I wandered downstairs to find my father reading the paper at the kitchen table. He barely looked up when I entered. "Dad, did you know Mom emptied my savings account?" He sighed, setting the paper down with deliberate slowness. His eyes, the same deep brown as mine, finally met my gaze. "Eliza, we've invested thousands in your brother's education. Now he's marrying into the Kaplan family. Do you understand what that means for our standing in this community? For our business connections?" He folded his hands like he was about to deliver a sermon. "Sometimes family requires sacrifice. But I've been saving for art school." "Yes, I know." He waved his hand dismissively. "You can always do that later. This wedding happens once." The familiar knot formed in my throat, the one that appeared whenever my desires were deemed insignificant. I swallowed it down as always. "Tyler doesn't even know, does he?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "There's no need to burden him. He has enough on his plate." My father returned to his paper, a silent dismissal. Later that afternoon, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor surrounded by sketches. Outside my window, I could hear my mother on the phone, excitedly discussing floral arrangements with Tyler's fiancée, Vanessa. Their laughter floated up like butterflies, carefree and light. I picked up a charcoal pencil and began to draw without thinking, harsh, angry strokes forming a hunched figure surrounded by towering shadows. The figure's mouth was a thin line, sealed shut. Its eyes, however, burned with an intensity that startled me. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Family dinner tonight to discuss wedding details. Mom says be there by 6. Wear something nice for once? No, please." No acknowledgement that I might have plans. Just an assumption that I would comply, as always. I stared at the drawing I'd just created, then back at the text. Something shifted inside me. A hairline fracture in the foundation of my silence. At exactly 6 p.m., I entered my parents' dining room wearing the same faded jeans and sweater I'd had on all day. My mother's disapproving glance bounced off me as I took my usual seat, the one partially hidden by the centerpiece. Tyler arrived late with Vanessa, both glowing with a particular radiance of people who believe the world exists to grant their wishes. The table erupted in greetings and hugs. No one noticed when I didn't join in. "We've secured the Grand Harbor Hotel," my father announced proudly. "It's costing a fortune, but nothing's too good for my son's big day." As my family clinked glasses around me, I became aware of a strange sensation building in my chest, like water pressing against a dam that had held firm for too long. While they discussed ice sculptures and guest lists, I silently calculated exactly what my stolen dreams had bought: imported champagne, monogrammed napkins, and a venue I would never be able to afford for my own wedding, should that day ever come. But they had miscalculated. They thought they were taking money, but they had actually stolen something far more precious: my silence. Because sometimes the quietest people have the most to say when they finally decide to speak. Or, in my case, to create. "You'll need to have these alterations done by Friday," my mother said, thrusting a garment bag into my arms. "The color washes you out, but Vanessa wants all the bridesmaids in periwinkle." She didn't wait for my response before turning back to her wedding binder, a 3-inch monstrosity bursting with fabric swatches and vendor contracts. I hadn't agreed to be a bridesmaid. No one had asked. One day, my name simply appeared on Vanessa's carefully curated wedding party list between her sorority sisters and cousins. I didn't realize I was a bridesmaid, I said, unzipping the bag to reveal a dress with a price tag that made my stomach lurch: $4.50 for a dress I'd wear once, in a color that made me look like I had the flu. My mother barely glanced up. "Of course you are. You're Tyler's sister. What else would you be?" A human being with a choice, I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I retreated to my room with the dress and added it to my mental tally: savings account, weekends, now my bodily autonomy. The wedding was consuming everything. The next morning, a text from Vanessa awaited me. "Bridal party meeting at my place, 10 a.m. Bring coffee, skim milk only. Wedding countdown, 73 days. When I arrived with the obligatory coffee tray, Vanessa's apartment was already buzzing with activity. 5 women I barely knew sat in a semicircle around Vanessa, who presided from an armchair like a queen holding court. One was attaching paper flowers to mason jars, another addressing invitations in careful calligraphy. "Eliza," Vanessa trilled, waving me over. "Perfect timing. We need someone to coordinate the rehearsal dinner, and since you already know all the family dynamics." Before I could respond, she handed me a leather-bound notebook. "Everything's in here: dietary restrictions, seating charts, timeline. Just make sure it all runs smoothly." "I have work that evening," I said quietly, thinking of my diner shift. Vanessa's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened slightly. "Well, you'll need to get that covered, won't you? This is your brother's wedding. It's kind of a big deal." The other bridesmaids nodded in unison, their expressions suggesting that refusing would be an act of family treason. So I nodded too, and another piece of my life was sacrificed to the wedding gods. Days blurred into weeks. I became the unofficial wedding coordinator, making calls during my lunch break, meeting vendors after work, addressing invitation envelopes until my fingers cramped. Meanwhile, my art supplies gathered dust in the corner of my bedroom. One night, after a particularly draining wedding planning session where I'd been talked over 14 times, I counted, I found myself staring at those abandoned supplies. Something pulled me toward them. Not inspiration, but desperation. I needed to feel like myself again, if only for a moment. I picked up a pencil, and suddenly 3 hours had vanished. When I looked down, I'd sketched a woman me, drowning in tulle and ribbon while faceless figures stood on the shore, glasses raised in toast. It was raw, honest, and it scared me. I shoved the drawing into my desk drawer, but I couldn't unsee it. Something had awakened. The next day at the diner, I was refilling coffee when my phone buzzed with my mother's ringtone. "Eliza, thank goodness. We have an emergency." My heart jumped. "Is someone hurt?"
Worse.
The calligrapher has pneumonia. She can't finish the place cards. Her voice had the tight, brittle quality it acquired when the universe dared to disrupt her plans. You'll need to do them. Mom, I have 2 jobs and I'm already handling the rehearsal dinner. I can't just... You're an artist, aren't you? Always doodling? This is practically the same thing. Calligraphy isn't doodling, and I have my own. Your own what, exactly? Her voice turned sharp. Nothing that can't wait, Shirley. This is family, Eliza. Family comes first. I glanced down at my stained waitress uniform, emblem of the job I might soon lose from all the shifts I'd had to miss.
Right.
Family first. That night, I sat cross-legged on my floor with 200 blank place cards spread around Maine. As I practiced ornate letters, I remembered how my high school art teacher had once told me I had remarkable talent. How she'd helped me apply for scholarships. How she'd hugged me when acceptance letters arrived. And now here I was, using that remarkable talent to write Mr. and Mrs. Harold Pemberton in gold ink. A tear fell onto one of the cards, smudging the still wet lettering. I'd have to redo it. Just like I'd have to redo my plans for the future. Just like I'd have to reconstruct my sense of self once this wedding typhoon had passed. You should be happy you're part of something big for once, my mother had said yesterday when I'd asked if someone else could help with the endless tasks. I stared at the ruined place card, the letters now blurring into an unrecognizable shape. Was this how people saw me? As a blurry, indistinct figure existing only to support others' dreams? I crumpled the card in my fist. That night, I dreamed of canvas and paint. I dreamed of colors so vibrant they hurt to look at and shapes so true they couldn't be ignored. I dreamed of creating something that would force people to see, really see, what had been happening all along. When I woke, I knew what I needed to do. I pulled out a large blank canvas I'd been saving for someday. I didn't have an art school education, but I had something more powerful, truth that demanded expression. As dawn broke, I began to sketch. The faceless woman from my earlier drawing reappeared, but now she had my eyes. Resolute, clear. The ribbons binding her would be labeled. The shadows looming over her would have my parents' postures, my brother's careless smile. I named it before I'd even painted the first stroke. Inheritance. Not the inheritance of money or property, but of expectations, of silence, of invisibility. It would be my voice when words failed, my testimony, and soon they would all bear witness. My bedroom transformed into a secret studio. I pushed furniture against the walls, laid down plastic drop cloths, and positioned the canvas where the light was best. Each night after wedding duties and work shifts, I'd lock my door and paint until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. I painted with a fury I'd never allowed myself to feel before. The central figure emerged first, a woman kneeling, her head bowed but not in submission. Her posture suggested potential energy, like a spring compressed to its limit. I gave her no face, letting viewers project themselves onto her blank features, though everyone who knew me would recognize the copper-red hair that matched my own. Around her wrists, ankles, and throat, I painted ribbons in varying shades of red, blood red, rust red, wine red. Each ribbon bore a word in careful gold lettering: loyalty, sacrifice, duty, family, silence, obedience. Some ribbons appeared slack, as if recently loosened. Others pulled taut, stretching toward 3 towering figures that took shape at the edges of the canvas. These figures I rendered in negative space, their absence more powerful than their presence. Their silhouettes were unmistakable to anyone who knew my family: my father's broad shoulders and slight stoop, my mother's perfect posture and characteristic tilt of the head, my brother's athletic stance. They held champagne glasses aloft in a toast, their empty faces turned away from the kneeling figure. Behind them, I painted a backdrop that resembled the Grand Harbor Hotel's ballroom where the reception would be held. I knew its layout intimately now, having been drafted to coordinate with the venue manager on everything from table arrangements to lighting design. The painting's palette was deliberately jarring. Muted grays and blues for the kneeling figure, contrasted with the vibrant golds and whites of the celebration scene. The ribbons were the only common element, binding the two worlds together. I worked on it obsessively for 3 weeks, stealing hours from sleep, canceling the few social engagements I still maintained. If anyone noticed the paint beneath my fingernails or the dark circles under my eyes, they attributed it to wedding stress. "You look terrible," my mother commented one morning as I rushed to another dress fitting. "Try to get some sleep. We can't have you looking haggard in the photos." I nearly laughed. Even my exhaustion was measured by how it might affect their perfect day. As the painting neared completion, a practical problem emerged: how to get it to the wedding venue without anyone discovering it beforehand. The canvas was large, almost 4 feet tall and 5 feet wide. I couldn't simply walk in with it under my arm. The solution came from an unexpected quarter. At the diner, I served coffee to Marcus, a local art gallery owner who occasionally came in for the pie. We developed a friendly rapport over the years, bonding over discussions of emerging artists and exhibition techniques. "You look like you're plotting something," he observed as I refilled his cup, my mind still working through logistical problems. I hesitated, then decided to take a chance. "I'm working on a piece for my brother's wedding," I said carefully. "It's a surprise. I need help getting it to the venue without the family seeing it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "A wedding gift? More like a statement piece." Something in my tone must have intrigued him. "Tell me more." Over his second slice of pie, I explained my vision, not the personal motivation behind it, but the aesthetic concept. How the piece would serve as a dramatic focal point behind the head table during the reception. How it needed to be installed during the ceremony when everyone would be occupied. "It sounds provocative," Marcus said finally. "Art should provoke," I replied, surprising myself with my conviction. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I have a delivery van and an assistant who's good at being invisible. We could make it happen." I scribbled down the venue details and timing. "There's a service entrance on the east side. The event coordinator, Janet, will be there at 4 p.m. Tell her it's part of the Alexander wedding decor package. And you're sure this is something the happy couple wants?" His eyes were shrewd. I met his gaze steadily. "It's something they need." The night before the wedding, I added the final touches to Inheritance. In the bottom corner, I signed it simply, "Yay." Subtle enough that it wouldn't immediately give me away, but clear enough for anyone who cared to know. I stood back and truly saw what I created. It wasn't just paint on canvas. It was years of swallowed words, of redirected dreams, of being the good daughter while disappearing into the background. It was beautiful and terrible and true. For the first time, I understood why my high school art teacher had been so adamant that I pursue this path. This feeling, this power to communicate what couldn't be said, was worth fighting for. The next morning, I called Marcus to confirm our plan. I'd arranged for the painting to be delivered during the ceremony, positioned behind the head table, and dramatically lit when the reception began. The hotel staff had been told it was a surprise commissioned by the groom's family, technically true, though not in the way they assumed. As I hung up, my phone immediately rang again. My mother. "Eliza, where are you? We need to be at the hotel in an hour for hair and makeup." "I'm on my way," I said, glancing at my paint-stained hands. I'd need to scrub them thoroughly before anyone noticed. As I gathered my bridesmaid dress and shoes, I took one last look at my creation. Tomorrow, it would be wrapped and on its way to the venue. By evening, everyone would see it. I touched the canvas gently, feeling a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. For years, I'd been a ghost in my own family, present but unseen. After tonight, they would never be able to unsee me again. Showtime, I whispered to myself and closed the door on my secret studio for the last time. The wedding ceremony was picture perfect. Vanessa floated down the aisle in a cloud of designer lace. My mother dabbed at carefully manufactured tears, and Tyler beamed with the confidence of a man who believed he deserved every good thing life offered him. I stood among the bridesmaids, my borrowed smile as stiff as my periwinkle dress. Throughout the vows, I kept checking my watch. By now, Marcus would be at the service entrance. The painting would be making its way to the reception hall. Janet, the event coordinator, would be directing the lighting technicians to highlight it properly. Everything was in motion. After the ceremony, guests milled in the garden for cocktail hour while the wedding party posed for what felt like thousands of photographs. The photographer positioned us with mathematical precision, parents front and center, Tyler and Vanessa flanked by her friends on one side and Tyler's groomsmen on the other. I was relegated to the edge of the frame, easily cropped out if necessary. "Eliza, for God's sake, smile properly," my mother hissed between poses. "You look like you're at a funeral." I stretched my lips wider, but my mind was elsewhere, counting minutes until the reception doors would open. At precisely 6 o'clock, the wedding coordinator gathered everyone for the grand entrance. The bridal party lined up in the hallway outside the ballroom. Through the crack in the double doors, I caught a glimpse of my painting, already installed on the wall behind the head table, draped with a white cloth and dramatically lit from above. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ's voice boomed from inside, "please welcome the parents of the groom, Richard and Diane Alexander." My parents swept through the doors to applause. I watched my mother's perfectly coiffed head disappear into the crowd. Bridesmaids and groomsmen were announced in pairs. When my turn came, I was escorted by Tyler's college roommate, who had spent the rehearsal dinner regaling everyone with stories of their fraternity days, stories that carefully excluded any mention of me, despite the fact that I had often driven to campus to help my brother through hangovers and failed relationships. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The DJ continued, "Please rise and welcome, for the first time as husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Tyler Alexander." The doors flung open. Tyler and Vanessa entered to a standing ovation, their faces glowing with the particular radiance of people who have never questioned their right to be the center of attention. As the head table was seated, I watched the exact moment when my mother noticed the large draped object on the wall behind them. She frowned, leaning over to my father, who shrugged. This wasn't part of the meticulous planning, not part of the script. The DJ guided everyone through dinner, toasts, and the traditional dances. All the while, the covered painting loomed above the proceedings like a specter at the feast. Guests kept glancing at it, curiosity building. I overheard whispered questions. "Is it a surprise gift? What's under the cloth? Is there going to be a special announcement?" After the father-daughter dance, which had moved my mother to genuine tears, the DJ called for everyone's attention again. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Alexander family has prepared a special surprise this evening." He looked momentarily confused by his own announcement, one I had added to a script without anyone's knowledge. "Please direct your attention to the wall behind our lovely couple." On cue, the lights dimmed everywhere except for the spotlights trained on my painting. Two waiters I had quietly spoken to earlier approached and ceremoniously removed the white cloth. Inheritance was revealed in all its raw, accusatory glory. For several seconds, the room was perfectly silent. Guests stared, trying to process what they were seeing. The kneeling figure, the binding ribbons with their damning labels, the faceless celebrants raising their glasses in oblivious toast. Then came the murmurs, the uncomfortable shifting in seats, the glances toward my parents, whose expressions had frozen in matching masks of confusion. Tyler stood first, his brow furrowed. "What the hell is this supposed to be?" He looked around the room. "Is this some kind of joke?" Vanessa's mother leaned forward, squinting at the painting. "Those ribbons say sacrifice and loyalty. What an unusual wedding gift." My Aunt Patricia, who had studied art in college before marrying into money, was the first to make the connection. "That looks like Eliza's style. She's quite talented, you know." She turned to my mother. "Diane, did Eliza create this for the wedding?" My mother's face had drained of color. Her eyes found me across the room, a mixture of confusion and dawning horror in them. This was the moment I had planned for, the moment to remain silent, to let the art speak for itself. But something stronger than my rehearsed restraint surged through me. 3 years of saving erased. A lifetime of being overlooked, of being the good, quiet daughter. It all crystallized into a single, urgent need to speak. I rose to my feet, my knees surprisingly steady. The room quieted as I walked to the microphone stand that had been used for toasts. My family watched my approach with expressions ranging from bewilderment to growing alarm. My father half rose from his chair, sensing trouble, but unsure how to head it off. "That piece," I said into the microphone, my voice clear and stronger than I'd expected, "is called Inheritance. It was made by the daughter, who gave up everything, so this could happen." The microphone amplified my breathing. Hundreds of eyes fixed on me. I had $23,467 saved for art school. Every penny I earned working double shifts and late nights. 3 weeks ago, I found out my parents emptied my account to pay for these centerpieces, that champagne, this venue. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. They didn't ask. I continued, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. They just took it. Because I'm the quiet one. The one who never complains. The invisible daughter. I looked directly at my parents, whose faces had hardened into familiar masks of disapproval. That painting shows what it feels like to be furniture in your own family. The silence that followed was absolute. My voice hung in the air, the final word echoing through the ballroom's perfect acoustics. Faces turned toward my parents, then back to me, then to Tyler and Vanessa at the head table. The silence had weight, pressing down on all of us. My father recovered first. He stood slowly, straightening his tuxedo jacket with practiced composure. His smile appeared rehearsed, the same one he used when smoothing over awkward business negotiations. "Clearly, there's been a misunderstanding," he announced, his voice pitched to carry just as mine had. "This is hardly the time or place for family finances to be discussed. Let's continue celebrating the happy couple." He nodded to the DJ, a clear signal to restart the music. But the DJ, reading the room, remained frozen behind his equipment. "No misunderstanding," I said, still holding the microphone. "They took my art school money without asking, without telling me." My voice didn't waver. They laughed when I found out. The murmurs resumed, louder now. I saw Tyler's father-in-law lean over to whisper something to his wife. Several of Vanessa's relatives looked visibly uncomfortable. My mother stood next, her smile tight and dangerous. "Eliza, you're making a scene? We can discuss this privately." "We've had years to discuss it privately," I replied. "I've been invisible in this family for 24 years. Today, I'm making myself seen." Tyler pushed back from the table, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment, probably both. "Jesus, Eliza. It's my wedding day. What the hell?" I turned to look at him, really look at him, perhaps for the first time in years. My brother, golden child, the sun around which our family orbited. "Did you know?" I asked simply. His eyes slid away from mine. "Know what?" "That they took my savings. That your wedding is being paid for with my future." They said. He hesitated, glancing at our parents. "They mentioned helping with the costs, but I assumed." "You assumed it was their money to give," I finished for him. "It wasn't." Vanessa had gone very still beside him, her perfect makeup unable to hide her dismay. She'd been talking about her dream wedding since our first meeting, but I wondered if her dream included stealing from family members. "I never meant," she began, but my mother cut her off. "This is ridiculous," my mother snapped, abandoning her social smile completely. "We're your parents. We've supported you your entire life. One contribution to your brother's future, hardly." "One contribution?" The words escaped me as a laugh, a sound so unfamiliar that it momentarily startled even me. "My entire childhood has been a contribution to Tyler's future. My time, my dreams, my work, and now my money. That painting isn't just about the wedding. It's about everything." I gestured to Inheritance, still dramatically lit above the head table. Those ribbons labeled loyalty and sacrifice aren't just artistic flourishes. They're my life. Aunt Patricia had moved closer to the painting, studying it with genuine interest. "It's exquisite work, Eliza," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. "The composition, the symbolism, you're more talented than I realized." Her sincere praise felt like a cool drink after years in the desert. My cousin Michael, always socially awkward but honest to a fault, piped up from his table. I never understood why you didn't go to art school after high school. Everyone knew you were the best artist in your class. Because someone had to help in the family business while Tyler was at college, I said, looking directly at my father. Someone had to be the responsible one. My father's face darkened. That's enough, Eliza. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. For the first time, his attempt to silence me with disapproval didn't work. The floodgates had opened, and there was no closing them now. I'm not embarrassing the family, I said, my voice steady. I'm telling the truth about the family. There's a difference. I turned to face the room at large. I apologized to everyone here who came to celebrate Tyler and Vanessa. This isn't about ruining their day. It's about finally being honest. Vanessa's grandmother, a tiny woman with shrewd eyes, spoke up unexpectedly. No need to apologize for honesty, dear. Some weddings cost more than money. Her words seemed to break some invisible barrier. Suddenly, conversations erupted throughout the room. Tyler was gesturing angrily at our parents. Vanessa had tears streaming down her face, carefully wiping them to preserve her makeup. My mother was attempting to quiet everyone down, while my father had pulled out his phone, perhaps calling his damage control specialists. I placed the microphone back in its stand. My part was done. As I walked toward the exit, people reached out to touch my arm or my shoulder. My high school English teacher, Mrs. Hendricks, squeezed my hand and whispered, "It's about time." Old family friends who had watched me fade into the background year after year nodded as I passed. Some looked away, uncomfortable with raw truth at a celebratory event. Others seemed relieved, as if a long-standing fiction had finally been acknowledged. At the door, I turned back for one last look. My painting dominated the room, impossible to ignore. The faceless woman with her labeled ribbons seemed almost alive now, breathing with possibility. I caught my father's eye across the distance. If family matters so much, I asked quietly, knowing he could read my lips even if he couldn't hear me, why was I treated like furniture? I didn't wait for an answer. Outside, the evening air felt clean and new against my skin. I slipped off the uncomfortable bridesmaid shoes and walked barefoot to my car, my steps lighter than they had been in years. Behind me, the reception continued, changed, disrupted, but ongoing. Ahead of me stretched an unmapped future, one I would shape with my own hands. For the first time in my life, I was not invisible. I was seen. 3 weeks after the wedding, I stood in the center of a small studio apartment across town, surrounded by moving boxes and the smell of new paint. The space was barely 500 square feet, with a kitchenette in one corner and a bathroom so small I could brush my teeth while showering. But it was mine, paid for with the first installment of an unexpected windfall. The morning after the wedding, my phone had blown up with notifications. Someone, I later discovered it was Vanessa's cousin, an influencer with a sizable following, had posted photos of inheritance online with a brief description of what had happened at the reception. By noon, the images had been shared thousands of times. That evening, as I was packing my belongings at my parents' house, an email arrived from Marcus. "Your painting has gone viral. Art critics are discussing it. 3 galleries have contacted me asking about the artist. This is unprecedented. Call me." I'd sat on my childhood bed, staring at the message in disbelief. Within days, I was being interviewed by local arts publications. A week later, my story appeared in a major art magazine under the headline, "Silent No More: How One Wedding Reception Became an Artistic Revolution." The painting itself never made it back to my possession. Tyler and Vanessa had left for their honeymoon the morning after the wedding, and my parents had removed inheritance from the venue. I assumed they destroyed it until my Aunt Patricia called to inform me that she had rescued it from my father's office, where he'd hidden it under a tarp. "It's too important to be buried," she'd told me. "What do you want me to do with it?" The answer had come from Marcus, who offered to display it as the centerpiece of a solo exhibition at his gallery. "You have more work, right?" he'd asked. "Or can you create more pieces like that one?" I had dozens of sketchbooks filled with images I'd never shown anyone, a lifetime of watching and feeling from the shadows. Now those observations would become my voice. The exhibition was scheduled for next month. I'd been working furiously to finish the collection, converting half of my tiny apartment into a makeshift studio. The advance from Marcus had covered the security deposit and first month's rent, with enough left over for art supplies and a decent easel. A knock at the door interrupted my unpacking. When I opened it, I found a delivery man holding a large, flat package. "Eliza Alexander?" he asked. I signed for it, curious. Inside was a framed print of Inheritance, a professional photograph taken before the wedding reception, along with a note from Marcus. "For your new walls. The original is generating quite a buzz at the gallery." I hung it immediately, the only decoration in my otherwise Spartan living space. Looking at it now, I felt neither the rage that had fueled its creation nor the vindication of that night at the reception. Instead, I recognized it as a turning point, the moment I'd stopped being invisible. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Back from honeymoon. Can we talk?" I'd received similar messages from my parents every day since the wedding. Like Tyler's, they remained unanswered. Not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to say. The painting had said it all. Instead, I responded to messages from people who had actually seen me. Aunt Patricia, offering to introduce me to her art collector friends, Mrs. Hendricks, my high school teacher, sending congratulations and validation, even Vanessa's grandmother, who had somehow obtained my number and called to tell me I had magnificent courage. Most surprising was a message from Vanessa herself, sent separately from Tyler's. "I didn't know about the money. I'm sorry. Your work is extraordinary." I believed her. The problem had never been Vanessa. It had been a family dynamic established long before she entered the picture. That evening, as I arranged my brushes and paints in my new space, my phone rang. The gallery owner from New York, the third to contact Marcus about my work. We spoke for 45 minutes about artistic influences, themes of visibility and voice, and the power of visual metaphor to communicate emotional truth. "We'd like to feature your work in our Emerging Artists Showcase next spring," she said finally. "Assuming your exhibition in town goes well." "It will," I said, with a certainty that would have been foreign to me just months ago. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my new home. For the first time in my life, no one was waiting for me to cook dinner or run errands or solve someone else's problems. No one was counting on my silence or my compliance. The freedom was dizzying. My old phone background, a family photo from last Christmas, with me slightly cropped at the edge, had been replaced with an image of my studio space, paint spattered and mine alone. When the phone rang again, I saw my mother's name on the screen. For weeks, I'd let her calls ring through to voicemail, her messages accumulating like unpaid debts. "Eliza, please call us back. We need to talk about what happened. Your father is very upset. This has gone too far." Each message more demanding than the last, none containing the words I might have needed to hear. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Your dreams matter too." Tonight, I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Not because I was afraid to answer, but because I was busy. I had stretched a new canvas on my easel, mixed my paints, and laid out my brushes. I had work to do. Important work. My work. The spotlight that had briefly illuminated Inheritance at the wedding reception had become a permanent light, one I had stepped into willingly. I was no longer the invisible sister, the silent daughter, the background character in my own life story. I was Eliza Alexander, artist. And I was just getting started.